Gather round and let me tell you a story from the early days of spaceflight. Now, it's a common misconception that the space race was just a two-way competition between the Soviet Union's Soviet space program and the United States National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Sure, they were the most famous players, but there was another. The Sand Destroy Space Agency, the SDSA. Back in the 1950s, the great superpowers of the world were entrenched on a multi-front scientific bout for supremacy. Both the Soviets and the United States partook of the fruits of Nazi Germany's own rocketry program, and used these with their space programs to boost their own missile capability. At this time, Sand Destroy was still in the infancy of proper cityhood. Oh sure, it had been around for centuries, but where the more popular burgs had evolved into metropolitan powerhouses, Sand Destroy was a podunk and little more than a local oddity for having the largest number of captive tigers per capita. But the mayor of Sand Destroy, Juan Orbitor, wanted more for his town. And so, with no small amount of ambition and very small amount of money to his name, the Sand Destroy Space Agency was formed. Mayor Orbitor knew that a conclusive victory by his town in the space race would set Sand Destroy in the minds of everyone worldwide forever. And that's what he aimed to do. By the 60s, the Soviets had put a human being into space, Yuri Gagarin, and the United States had launched its Mercury and Gemini programs in a bid to surpass them. While these greater powers had recruits from former Nazi scientists, Mayor Orbitor had to turn elsewhere. The former Imperial Japan. While the Japanese had made almost no progress in the fields of rocketry and nuclear technology, their research in microwave and beam transmission technology during the war was remarkable for the time, and rather foolishly passed over by the United States. The mayor put a number of Japanese scientists to work, aiming to develop the world's first beam-powered rocket. The result was remarkable, astounding. A wonder the United States didn't find out about it. One Sand Destroyer man and 100 Japanese men he kidnapped by Scorpion Point had managed to create a beam rocket that he dubbed the Sand Destroy Dream. But now the mayor had a new problem. He had a rocket, but no one to pilot it. See, most people have an idea of how hard it is to be an astronaut. It takes guts, it takes smarts, it takes a great deal of luck. But what most don't know is that it truly takes a killer. The space race had become literally cutthroat. Astronauts on both sides of the race were entrenched in overt war, the blood sport spilling into space itself as astronauts and cosmonauts began killing each other in the depths of the cosmos. The Apollo 1 incident proved to be the last straw for the Americans, who mobilized a retrofitted Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong into the Apollo program, allowing them to achieve the lunar landing in 1969. The Soviet Union's hopes to make it there first, let alone Mayor Orbitor's, were dashed. They just could not compete with men who could punch that good. But of course that wasn't the end of the story. No, the Soviets knew they were beaten when it came to getting to the moon. That didn't mean that they couldn't stop the United States as well. Applying the beam technology acquired from its own Japanese scientists, alongside regular old Soviet gumption, the Soviet Union created a weapon that could prevent the United States from ever reaching the moon again. The Volk, a laser-emitting combat satellite. And to command it, they chose none other than Captain Vladimir Tokhtarov, a veteran cosmonaut with a bone to pick with Aldrin and Armstrong. Captain Vladimir had been a cosmonaut since the early days of the race. He'd been there when Yuri went up, and his then fiancée, Valentina Tereshchenko, became the first woman in space. But his own ambitions to be the first man on the moon were dashed by the guile and might of Aldrin and Armstrong, who went on to make it there instead. It was the loss of his dream, and with it, the loss of his love. He could never forgive the United States for his defeat, let alone let them continue to rub salt in the wound by continuing to place men there. With the Volk, he could deny the United States access to space forever. And once the Soviets' control of space was assured, they could then turn it on the US homeland itself. For now, however, the Soviet Union's dreams of reaching the moon were gone. But Mayor Orbitor did not give up. No, Sand Destroyer would never place the first man on the moon. But he could still make a name for itself. He could still accomplish something with its space agency. Unable to find a pilot lethal enough, Mayor Orbitor nearly fell into despair, until he struck brilliance. He recruited into his ranks Timothy Esquire, a 700-pound Bengal tiger strapped into a spacesuit and filled with pure feline hatred. With this, the mayor knew Sand Destroyer would have a chance of standing up to even the likes of Neil and Buzz. And on April 11th, 1970, Timothy Esquire and the Sand Destroyer Dream launched into outer space. And as fate would have it, this coincided with a launch by the United States. The end result was disaster. NASA's orbiter was damaged beyond repair, forcing a hazardous return home. The Soviets' Volk narrowly avoided destruction, but Captain Vladimir suffered irreparable supernatural brain damage from exposure to the harmful space rays of space. And Timothy Esquire? Well, Timothy Esquire became the first tiger to land on the moon. A week later, at the Sand Destroyer Space Agency launch complex, Timothy Esquire made his triumphant return to Earth. In the ensuing carnage, he completely demolished the Sand Destroyer Space Agency and began killing everyone associated with it. As Mayor Orbitor lay broken and dying, being eaten alive by a 12-foot Bengal tiger, he must have felt something approaching pride, for he had accomplished the impossible, and even if history wouldn't remember it, that tiger would. And really, isn't that all that matters?